everyone. Thank you for joining today's webcast. My name is Dustin Smith and I'll be your moderator for today's session, Brands Under Attack, How You Can Protect Your Brand Online and Manage Digital Risk. So just want to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started today. So you may have noticed that upon joining that your phone lines have been placed on mute. They'll stay that way for the duration of the webcast just to eliminate any background noise and make sure that we get a good recording. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation to our speakers, and you can do this by submitting via the Q&A panel that you'll find at the bottom of the Event Center console, or by sending a private chat to the host, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during our time today. And if we don't get to any of them live, we'll follow up with you directly via email. And just as a reminder to all attendees, we will be sending a copy of today's slides and the recording after the session. So without further ado, I would just like to introduce our speakers. So first we've got Rami Rifat, and Rami is joining us today from Spire Solutions, where he's a senior product manager with over 20 years of helping customers in the area of cyber and information security. His passion is threat intelligence, and his aim is to help customers build their cyber threat intelligence practice. And then we've also got Dr. Jamie Collier here from Digital Shadows, the Cyber Threat Intelligence Team Lead. Jamie's recently completed his PhD at the University of Oxford, where his research examines the intersection of cybersecurity and international relations, and he's also actively involved in the Centre for Technology and Global Affairs as research affiliate. And we're also going to be joined by Tom Sam here at Digital Shadows, who is our Security Solutions Engineer. And Tom's going to be running through a short demo of Digital Shadows Searchlight at the end of the presentation. So thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to pass on to Rami, who's going to kick things off. And Rami, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you, first of all. Thank you for being interested in attending our webinar. Let me start by a short introduction about Spire Solutions. Spire Solutions has been a security VAD in the region for over 10 years. I'm sure a lot of you have had an experience with us one way or the other. We value our partners, and we work always to provide you the latest cybersecurity solutions in niche areas. We have been built on technical capabilities. Our core is the technical team that we have, and for the past 4 years we've been quite interested in the area of threat intelligence, working step by step towards building a full portfolio and a full offering that would cover the threat intelligence requirements of our customers. We have our main head office in the UAE, and we have offices all over the region, so we're always there to support you directly and indirectly through the resellers. Our threat intelligence portfolio covers several areas, starting from training to threat intelligence feeds, IOCs, TTPs, actual profiles, all this stuff, and reports. And one major part of the threat intelligence providing also that we're covering today is the digital risk protection, which we'll have a deeper look into. We also cover intelligence analysis and automation orchestration tools, tip platforms, so on and so forth, to cover as much as possible from the requirements that we see in the market day by day, building the right backup from technical capabilities to provide our customers with the right support as mentioned. We understand that when it comes to cybersecurity solutions, especially in the threat intelligence part, it's not one size for everyone. It has to be customized, it has to be tailored to the requirements of every entity based on where they stand and what they want to achieve with this. When we come now to talk about digital risk protection, we have Digital Shadows on board. We've been representing Digital Shadows in the region for quite a good period of time right now. Digital risk protection is not only intended for security teams. It covers any kind of digital risk or any kind of similar requirement to every to every department within the entity. starting from the security departments to maybe even the marketing, the risk and governance, so on and so forth. So it's we have Digital Shadows here. We're very proud that we represent Digital Shadows. Digital Shadows is one of the oldest companies in this area, covering the full digital risk protection portfolio. Started at 2011. They are named as a leader in the Forrester report of 2018 for the digital risk protection, and they are quite granular when it comes to tailoring and when it comes to understanding and providing the requirements of the entities as we move forward. The good thing about digital risk protection, though, today we'll be focusing more on one of the use cases, is that once you have the full-fledged of digital risk protection, you cover what I would call a 360 view of where your digitization has taken you over the years and where exposures are step by step. I would like to pass it over now to Jamie, where he will be taking us towards the depth of this solution.
Thanks, Rami. Can you hear me okay here?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, brilliant. I'll get going then. So as Rami kind of mentioned, I'm going to be talking about brand attacks. And I think just to put this in a wider context before we kick off, I think the main ethos for us at Digital Shadows is that we really see security as something that extends beyond a network perimeter. And actually that idea of just defending your network perimeter is increasingly outdated. You know, we talk about embracing cloud, social media, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things now actually exist outside of our network. And I think as organizations really embrace that digital transformation, it's really key that they kind of understand and are able to mitigate and manage the risks that extend, you know, that affect them outside of that perimeter. So one of those is clearly kind of brand attacks, right? And it's clear that organizations are required to have an online presence for growing their brand. And I think that's something that, you know, is really great. There's, you know, clearly a huge amount of kind of benefits to be derived from having this exciting online presence, you know, new ways to reach customers, engage with prospects and clients. So all of that should be embraced. And of course, it comes with these digital risks. We'll be talking about some of those risks today. But what we really want to be doing is actually, you know, allowing those opportunities to thrive. And I think part of this is about developing a really cohesive, a comprehensive strategy to actually be able to do that, to really embrace it, to kind of go through that digital transformation with a lot of confidence. So in terms of the structure of what I'm going to be talking about today, really kind of two main areas. I think to start with, I'm going to be talking about some of those kind of brand attacks that we talk about. And the thing that I want to impress upon you here is just a variety of attacks that we can see. So, you know, some of you on the call might be thinking, well, we already as a company monitor, for example, negative sentiment on Twitter or social media channels. Isn't that enough? Haven't we got that kind of brand attack box covered? And I think as I said, what I'd like to do is show you just the variety, the breadth of different attacks that we see and their business impacts. And then I'm going to shift gears a bit and talk about how you can actually implement an effective online brand protection plan. Because as I said, you know, you can kind of have this piecemeal approach where you maybe look at some negative sentiment online, maybe you're kind of looking at some spoof domains, but is it all matching up? Is there a kind of broader strategy at play where all those different mitigation attempts are underpinned by a clear strategy, a clear direction? So that's what we'll be talking about in the second half, and then relating that to kind of how Digital Shadows might be able to help with that through our Searchlight platform. So we'll talk about a few different brand attacks in practice. I think one of the most, here are the kind of four I'll be talking about. We've got domain impersonation, social media account impersonation, CEO or company executive impersonation, and of course mobile apps that are becoming increasingly popular both for organizations and within the threat landscape. So in terms of domain impersonation, I'm sure a lot of you on the call are familiar with this. Most commonly known form is, you know, a spoof domain. So this might either be where a threat actor registers a domain that looks similar to a brand, or actually, even if a brand's official domains are about to expire, you sometimes see threat actors actually being able to kind of get those for themselves. And yeah, I won't go into this in too much depth, as I'm sure most of you are kind of quite familiar with this. But in its most basic form, it's using a brand name, it's imitating a brand in some way to hosting content that mimics the brand. And this might be for a scam, it might be for phishing, all sorts of different ways that we can kind of use that. And I think that, critically, it can be used to engage and engineer end users, whether that's prospects, whether that's clients, whether that's employees. If they think that content is legitimate, much more likely to kind of fall for any traps. And as I said, also regularly used in phishing emails. If you're sent a phishing email and it's got it's from a legitimate looking domain, you as either an employee or a kind of potential customer, much more likely to kind of believe that. The second kind of bucket of attacks we want to talk about today is social media account impersonation. And this is becoming increasingly common. Organizations seeing their brands being imitated online via social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Often kind of promoting deals that are probably too good to be true, but for those kind of end users, for those kind of prospects, the potential customers, they're going to be enticed by those. And works in many ways similar to other kind of types of brand attack, in terms of kind of imitating the brand. And I think the key here is it can be done in different ways. So it could be the official kind of Twitter account that they're trying to mimic, but it could also be support accounts. Often these have fewer followers, so it's kind of easier to kind of imitate them, for example. There's a really interesting case study here, actually, which is based by a group called Armine, who actually believed to be kind of based in Dubai in the Middle East. But Armine's a really interesting example, because what they do is they compromise Twitter accounts. So you can see here on the left, they've compromised the official Olympics Twitter account. And what they do is they compromise these accounts to advertise their own security services. Which is is quite strange, because it's almost a marketing, a form of marketing for them, and trying to advertise actual security services rather than anything kind of more overtly malicious. But you can see here, if you're kind of managing the Olympics Twitter account, if you're in that marketing team, this clearly kind of puts the Olympics brand into disrepute. And the critical thing here is that these accounts were often accessed via third-party social media platforms. So these might be platforms that allow us to schedule tweets when we're going to be asleep. They might be allowing us to kind of track metrics of who's engaging with our social media. And these third parties, there may be some question marks around their security. And I think the key here is the social media accounts, the use of social media tools. Are they integrated into a security strategy, into the security processes? Often, a security team, they will protect the perimeter, they'll be looking at phishing, etc. And they'll just kind of look at social media as something that the marketing team do that's not really, it doesn't really impact them. And I think this shows actually it needs to be more integrated. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. The third issue is CEO or company executive impersonation. Now, this is something that's actually really common in the Middle East. Speaking to some of our subject matter experts within the company that look at the Middle East specifically, they say that this comes up a lot, and this will typically be someone impersonating a CEO, whether that's through a social media account, whether that's through phishing emails, and they'll try and solicit employees into releasing funds, sensitive documents, etc. And I think the critical thing here is it doesn't just have to be a company executive. We've even seen suppliers being impersonated in the past. So certainly something to kind of watch for different vectors, whether that's emails, social media profiles, etc. And I think the final area is mobile app impersonation. Now, this is something that I think we're going to really see accelerated in the next few years as organizations increasingly going mobile. And again, it's that point of we want to embrace this, because mobile apps, they provide huge amounts of positive opportunities to engage with both prospects and customers, as well as employees. It can really kind of help productivity, especially as we're going more remote, especially as we're maybe traveling a bit more. Now, cyber criminals, of course, want to capitalize on this. So it's really important to understand, are there fake apps being created, or, imitating your organization? And one thing to note is that these can be found on legitimate app stores. So in the last year, we found malicious apps on both Google Play and iOS App Store. And these app stores have, stringent vetting processes. They're testing apps. They're making sure they're not malicious, but still threat actors are able to get around those testing mechanisms. So, really got to be careful there. So why should you care about this? Why does it actually impact your bottom line? Well, a few different ways. I think first of all is clearly loss of customer trust. It can clearly cost quite a lot. And especially in the digital era, if you're not interacting with customers or potential end users face to face, then actually the digital trust is increasingly important. It really is everything at the moment. And you can see this relates to a few different factors. It could be around customer service, reliability, vision, security, all these different areas. And I think what's interesting is even if it's a different website that's imitating your brand, it's not actually your fault in the sense that your network's not been compromised. Your brand can still be associated with all that negativity. So really important to kind of manage that broader ecosystem. So lack of customer trust is the first one. The second one would be financial loss, probably the most obvious. But these often lead to quite significant financial loss. And that can kind of be, that can inflict itself in organizations in a few different ways. One area that I think we should be really looking at going forward is the regulatory environment. And if we are kind of having a brand attacks, if people are getting access to our actual social media accounts and they're leaking information, that could kind of lead to some kind of serious repercussions. Now, the third area is competitive disadvantage. So if you're trying to compete with others, I think the reliability of your brand, the security around your brand, that's going to be increasingly important in the digital era as we go forward. So as I said, the second half of this webinar, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about building a good online brand protection plan. And I think the key here is approaches to online protection once amounts to just kind of tracking negative sentiment on Twitter. And actually, that's not really enough anymore. It requires a much more cohesive and joined up strategy. And that involves a few different things. We'll be talking about those in the next few slides, but I think critically, it involves continual monitoring and remediation of threats to a brand, whether that's domains, mobiles, all the things we've just talked about. But it needs to be continuous. It needs to be something that's happening in real time as much as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about the principles of that strategy, help you guys on the call to actually implement those principles later on. The first area I want to talk about is the importance of identifying key stakeholders. And this is quite an interesting issue, I think, from a security perspective, because if we think of that traditional perimeter, it's quite clearly owned by the security team. But this actually often involves a few different teams. We might look at the marketing team, the brand team, that might be part of marketing clearly, legal teams. So already there's quite a wide range of stakeholders. And the key when you've got a wide range of stakeholders is managing those stakeholder relationships. So what are the goals of each department? How does brand and brand attacks affect them? What are they looking to get out of this? The security team might be really interested in preventing access to the network. They might be interested in the security aspect of this rather than marketing. They're going to be most interested in how does our brand get damaged? How do we maintain our reputation as a brand? So that collaboration, that cross-functional teamwork, that's really important when you've got all these different teams. And it's quite a unique challenge. So, the security teams, they typically now do have experience working with wider stakeholders, making sure that security strategy is aligned with a broader risk, the risk management or the risk strategy of an organization. We don't really think of marketing, brand as teams and stakeholders that come into that as much, but I think actually that's increasingly important. So you can kind of see here, this might be a kind of a provisional stakeholder map for brand attacks, and you can see this involves a variety of different areas. And when we go back to Armine and we think about how third-party social media tools we used, I think that's where the CISO and the security teams can really start to play an important role in auditing the security of a brand, the security of an organization's social media account, for example. Make sure are those password policies that we enforce elsewhere, are they applying to our social media accounts, or make sure that social media accounts aren't existing in that vacuum that they might elsewhere. The second thing that any organization implementing a brand protection strategy needs to do is actually monitor and establish their assets and review that configuration. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's important to know what your key assets are, the organization's crown jewels, effectively. You know, what are you actually protecting? What are you worried about? What could a brand attack look like for you? Is it purely about social media accounts, or is it the apps that we've talked about? Is it about you know, impersonation of key individuals? So understanding what those assets are, that means we can kind of start to build a plan to actually protect them a bit more. And if we know those key assets, one way we can protect them is monitoring when they're exposed across the open, deep and dark web. So for example, if we're looking at a social media account, we could see if there is someone selling access to that online. And that would be one way, that would be one kind of traditional use case, what the sort of thing we might look at. And as I said before, really important that this is continuously reviewed, the assets are being updated. You know, I think the key with a digital transformation is that organizations can be really agile. And if they need to create a new app to respond to a new market or a new demand or a new use case, they should be able to do that really quickly. The key is if developers are building a new app, if they are seizing on those market opportunities, is that approach synced in with brand protection, digital risk strategy? Are they syncing in with the security teams, making sure it goes through those security processes, whether that's passwords, whether that's multi-factor authentication, etc. The third area is creating internal playbooks with scenario planning. And this is actually really similar to a lot of what we know in cybersecurity. So if we think of incident response, it's all about practice and training. And we can really test our resilience as an organization, our ability to bounce back and recover from an attack. If we do this kind of scenario planning, we run tabletop exercises, something we preach all the time in the industry. And actually, when it comes to digital risks, when it comes to brand protection, that's no different. It's exactly the same process. You know, the scenarios themselves, the exercises themselves might be a little bit different because we're clearly talking about a different topic, a different subject than a network intrusion. But the underlying principles of how we prepare remain exactly the same. And going back to that first issue about stakeholder management, I think the important thing here is that we actually bring all those key stakeholders together and we make sure that if there is a brand attack, if our social media account has been compromised, is that something where the security team and the marketing team and the legal team are all running in parallel? The fourth one is a bit more generic. It doesn't just apply to those key stakeholders, it applies to everyone in an organization, and especially those kind of working on areas that could potentially impact their brand. And it's to make sure that awareness more broadly is built up. So a number of different ways we can do that. We can establish policies that all employees should abide by. We can, you know, things like strong password policies, for example. But I think the key here is this bottom one, is how it should be ingrained into company culture. So often when you have a new employee or onboarding, you might kind of have a security awareness training. This is often automatically done as part of an onboarding session. Actually, we can start to integrate some of this digital risk, some of this kind of brand stuff into those kind of sessions. We can make sure that employees, as they join, maybe through annual checkups, they understand what digital risk means, what it looks like. And I want to just finish quite briefly talking a little bit about what Digital Shadows as an organization does to help with online brand protection. And before I do that, I actually want to just highlight digital risk more broadly, because if you think of online brand security, you can see this middle pillar. It's really what we've been talking about today is this, but actually there is a broader issue at play here about digital risk. And you know, we talked about how managing your online brand, it goes beyond just tracking negative sentiment on Twitter. It's this broader issue of brand security and brand protection. Well, actually, brand protection sits as this even broader umbrella term of digital risk. And there's different areas that this kind of includes. So one is clearly data loss detection, right? So if you've got important files, sensitive documents, and they're either on third-party clouds that have been exposed, someone hasn't put a password on one of those, maybe you're working with a third party that somehow exposed your documents, maybe some of your data is for sale on the dark web. You know, all of that, it goes beyond your own perimeter, but it's still something that's really critical to manage. And the second one, or the third one, in fact, would be attack surface reduction. So that's talking about things like vulnerabilities, open ports, misconfigured devices. Again, you know, something that kind of really critical to digital risk. But I'll talk specifically about how this could relate to brands as well. So this is the kind of the process for which we go through, and I'll talk about each of these steps in turn. But effectively, the way that Digital Shadows works is we try to understand an organization, understand what's important to them. We go and search how their kind of assets might be mentioned online. And then what we do is try and provide both contextualized threat intelligence and, I think most importantly, mitigation advice to actually help equip organizations deal with all of this. Because it's all well and good saying, you know, you've told me about how my brand has been under attack, but how do I actually mitigate? How do I actually prevent this from happening? So, as I said, 4 different stages. The first is identifying those key assets. That's really understanding what matters to you as an organization. What are your Twitter handles? What are your Instagram pages? Who are these VIPs that might be spoofed in the future? And once we understand all of this, we have a really kind of rich understanding of what the legitimate applications are. You know, we can then kind of start to figure out what wouldn't be welcome, what would be a brand attack, for instance. So once we have all that information, it can then go and collect. So a number of different ways we do this. And I think one thing that we're really strong at is that automated collection, whether that's kind of scraping online, looking at things like code repositories, looking at mobile app stores, for example, all these things you see on the left. But I think the key here is that we complement all of that by subject matter expertise. We've got really strong human angle, human intelligence, applied research, analysts such as myself working really hard to make sure we kind of bring some added value beyond the automated side. So a good example would be, we have a lot of experts that are able to gain access to closed sources. These might be dark web forums that you can't just go on. You've got to have a membership there. You've got to prove that you're kind of in that community. So we have people kind of trying to get access to those and monitoring how our clients might be mentioned online. So really kind of hope that the subject matter expertise is really underpinning our service rather than just being a kind of automated service. It's really the combination of those two that becomes a very powerful tool. And then if we do see these kind of incidents, if we do see things that might be of concern, such as a spoofed VIP or a domain that looks like it's spoofing your brand, what we want to do is not just let you know, but actually provide that broader context. So what is the impact of this? You might be interested in the seller or the forum in which data was for sale. We want to provide all that context of what we're actually looking at here. So something we can kind of maybe touch on in the demo, but really kind of provide that rich context of what's going on, what's the broader context, and that helps both from a mitigation perspective, but it also helps in terms of communicating with internal stakeholders. So if you do experience a brand attack, a lot of those people within the firm, whether that's a CEO, a chief security officer, etc., they're all going to be interested in who was this attack conducted by, etc. And being able to provide that context can be really important. And as I said, finally, what's really important is that mitigation. So if your brand is under attack, if there is that spoof domain, what can we do about it? How can we actually prevent this happening? How can we kind of take this down? So that's something we really try and bake in throughout our services, is the mitigation advice, really helping to kind of protect our organizations. So that's all from me. I think I'm going to hand over now to Tom, who will take you through the demo.
Awesome, thank you very much, Jamie. Can you hear me all okay?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. So thank you all for your time today. I'm Tom Sams. I'm going to be giving you a quick overview of our demo platform today. So as you can see, this is the Digital Shadows demo platform, and we are an online SaaS solution. And one of the beauties of that is the fact that you can access our platform from anywhere in the world. And the first thing you do, the first thing you see as soon as you log in is this overview here. So in this example, we are filling some of these really great examples of alerts and incidents with a pretend brand called MoleNet. So MoleNet's a fully fictitious brand, but we're using it so that we can actually obfuscate some of the real life examples within this demo portal. So as Jamie said earlier, we have some of the best coverage in the industry across the surface, open, deep and dark web, technical sources and documents. And this gives you a little bit of an idea in just sort of 90 days what that looks like. And what we've done is we've managed to convert this overall coverage into a footprint, and this footprint is the number of touches of your organization. So whether this is within the context of brand, or whether this is within the context of data loss protection or attack surface reduction, this is the overall footprint, an example of a footprint for a given organization. So of course this changes based on the size of the organization, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's any less important. And what we've managed to do for our customers is we've taken this number of results, which is, as you can see, reasonably high at 300,000 or just under, and we've converted them into a number of really a small number of really actionable alerts and incidents. And these alerts and incidents will be fully contextualized. So what do we mean by contextualized? We mean it's in other words that it's going to be enriched. And it's going to be enriched so that whether you're a security analyst, whether you're a manager, whether you're within marketing, you'll be given all of the context and information that you need in order to deep dive into that and really understand and make use of the alert and incidents which we provide. So to give you a sense of the sorts of things you could receive, so these are available to view within the triage view here. So you can see across the use cases, whether it's something like data loss protection, so loss of documents, technical information, loss of customer data, information from, I don't know, mergers and acquisitions, threat actors, competitors, whether it's online brand security. So, you know, as Jamie mentioned earlier, some of the questions we can answer are, has someone been trying to convince customers, partners, employees? Is someone trying to spoof malicious mobile applications? And also across the more sort of broad attack surface reduction pillar, which Jamie showed you a little bit earlier, and that includes things such as security issues, so things like open ports, misconfigured devices. So as you can see, we have an amazing breadth across your digital footprint. So going back to one of the main focus, so online brand protection. As you can see here, within this view, I have the capability to really really drill down into a number of different use cases. So if I go into brand protection, just as an example, you can see, and I've just clicked on a result here. So this result is one of finding a spoofed application. So what do we mean by that? Well, one of the things which we see, certainly one of the things I see in my job doing proof of concepts and supporting customers within the trial phase is certainly spoofed applications. So these applications are copied across the internet. They could be completely made from scratch, or we've seen a lot of threat actors copy code. And what do they do with this code? Well, there's a number of things. The two main categories of risk specific to this are where customers funnel, where threat actors funnel customer credentials through to an unauthorized third party and capturing customer credentials. Obviously, this could have a really significant impact on your brand, and to the point of actually having an impact on your revenue. So it really is a fantastic example here. So you can see what are we showing you within this example of incident? Well, we're giving you an overall description. So we're explaining that what particular application we found. We're performing a high-level app assessment to be able to give you a sense of, okay, are they just sort of copying your brand in order to steal it because it's a good brand, or are they copying it for the purposes of doing something malicious? Well, in this case, it's something malicious. And you can see some of the categories of things which can actually be used within this application for malicious purposes. So one of the examples I gave earlier, of course, was capturing customer credentials, but these can also be used as a method to perform a number of different malware activities, such as present ads, act as spyware, observe customers without authorization. Obviously, imagine having your brand actually connected to these sorts of activities. And so these can also target employees internally. So one of the things we often forget about within the context of brand protection is internal brand protection. Well, employees often spoof and copy applications in order to target internal employees as much as they might be able to damage your brand outside. So providing with all the technical details required to actually take action on this, and that includes the impact. So in this example, as it explains here, the use of copyrighted branding and terms could mislead customers into believing this application is legitimate, often with the aim of phishing or social engineering. So this individual piece of alert can also let you know that there might be an associated campaign of phishing and social engineering alongside. And that's something that we see quite a lot as well. Some of the examples of the sorts of things which this code could be doing, we've spoken about for a high level already. So malware, more generically spyware, evader. So evader is where we're actually doing things like disabling security settings. We are making changes to the actual device the application is on. And the recommended action, well, in this case, it gives you an example of a takedown request. So bear in mind, these malicious applications won't just necessarily be within the official app stores. These can also be copied to third-party app stores. And so that's where having a view across the whole open, deep, and dark web is really important, because you need to be able to capture where has my application been copied to. It's not enough simply to monitor the main app stores. Certainly where you've got app stores which put a little bit of time into making sure what they have listed is legitimate. So you can see that, however, we're not just focused on brand protection. As I mentioned earlier, we're also looking at things like data loss protection, attack surface reduction. So what's an excellent example of data loss protection in terms of an alert would be this particular alert here. So this is one of marked documents. So we're looking across the open, deep, and dark web. 4 documents. This is an example of loss, and of course, loss can be just as damaging to your brand and to your organization file loss. But you can see that with each alert and incident, we're providing it with a score, and that's broadly worked out based on the sorts of things which are within the document, so that the types of assets used in order to identify it, the risk probability, so the likelihood of the risk occurring, and the impact, so how dangerous this would be should this risk actually come to fruition. In this case, it already has, and that will provide us with an alert score. And that's how we sorted out some of those results you saw earlier into high, medium, and low. Alongside, going back to the original piece around prioritization of workflow, and also around context, we're providing you with all of the information you need to be able to actually manage these results in an operationally efficient way. So whether you're logging in as a security analyst, whether you're logging in as an IT person, whether you're logging in as a manager or as somebody within marketing, we're providing you with the matched branding assets which we use in order to detect this document, and all the context you need to be able to understand it. And in terms of operationalizing this information, also complementing it with a playbook. So and this is following the NIST framework, and is broadly dividing that out into 3 categories. So detection analysis, initial immediate actions you could take to contain, manage, or reduce the risk. Well, these actions are very similar to the actions that we saw in the last brand protection alert. So things such as, for example, actually performing a takedown on the content. So a takedown service is a managed service that we provide, which allows you to remove content from anywhere on the internet, this is something that you can do in a couple clicks within us. You actually start that process, and we'll handle from beginning to end the removal of that content from the internet, whether it's accidental file loss in this case, or whether it's a threat actor deliberately spoofing your applications. We can help you take those off of the internet. Here you'll see some more broad guidance around post-incident activity, and this is a lot of this advice is quite common sense things that a lot of people on the call will already see, but will already know about. But one of the great things about these playbooks is, irrespective of the level of understanding of the user from a security perspective, and we're providing all of this information for anyone to be able to make use of this information. So, what could I do within the portal once I've received this? Well, I could choose to reject this, resolve the issue, as well as do things such as start the takedown. And it's through these simple buttons at the top, and through this triage view, that the bulk of the digital risk protection for an organization can be dealt with in an operationally efficient way. Of course, I know that many organizations will be doing things such as running SIEM solutions, ticketing solutions, and of course, for the vast majority of those solutions within the marketplace, we actually offer turnkey integrations as well. So not only can you consume the information and make the most of it through this SaaS portal, but you can also actually set up individual workflows into your existing security investments, making the most of what you already have. Finally, as a last example, because we saw some examples around open and brand protection, one really good final example would be one of credential exposure, because I think this is so key, and this also ties into, you know, one of the great things about digital risk protection is all of the main use cases do interlap. So, you know, credential exposure, how is this related to brand protection? Well, having unlimited access to protected information, it could definitely be used to damage brand. You know, and we know just what some of the consequences of this are. So, you know, one of the most clear-cut one is direct revenue loss through damage to the company's reputation. It could be things like actually detecting where key assets such as designs, things which threat actors could use to actually copy some of the most important products which a company sells. You know, this could damage and dilute their brand, dilute their reputation. You know, so and that's just the data loss example. So all of these things are all interconnecting, as we all know. And so, you know, just with this really straightforward view here, this is quite a technical one. You know, credential loss. Somebody has lost their username and password on the internet. This is something we see quite a lot, and in many of the proof of concepts I undertake, we'll actually find hundreds and hundreds, if not in some cases thousands, of companies' usernames and passwords. And of course, threat actors have software they can check, which allows them to check against multiple different repositories of data within seconds. So just having this is an example here for our pretend brand Molnet, but to really receive these alerts as soon as this information has been lost can have such a great impact on the prevention of both, you know, traditional security, so access to information they shouldn't, as well as things such as brand loss protection. And of course, we're not just going to provide our users with a triage view with alerts and incidents specific to them. We actually go up and above that to provide them with a full search functionality that gives them access to a portion of our database. And when I say a portion, this allows you to search in quite natural language, as well as more fancy queries if you feel like it, across a whole range of different points of information on our solution. So this includes things such as incidents, our entire intelligence portal, as well as things such as PACE social media view. And so just by entering a social media and then your brand name, you can search. Oh, try not to set off my Apple Watch there this morning. But just by searching social media and entering in plain natural queries, we can come back with results. And so it really is a powerful tool which allows you to both proactively make searches across the open, deep, and dark web, give your teams access to views that you would not otherwise have, as well as receive alerts which are generated using both our industry-leading team of analysts, which speak over 26 different languages, as well as our industry-leading automation, which uses machine learning to deliver results within, often within minutes of them actually coming into being. So I just wanted to check with our host now. How am I doing for time at the moment?
You are perfectly on time. You've got about 2 minutes left.
Excellent. So just want to keep on time there. So I hope this gives you a very high-level overview of the sort of things you can expect to see. I think I'm going to use that very last 2 minutes just to give you a very high-level view of our intelligence view. So not only are we providing you with alerts and incidents, not only are we providing you with a tool to proactively search across these and across the open, deep, and dark web, a portion of our database, we're also providing you with more broad intelligence. So very briefly, to give you an example, if I was to click on a well-known natural phenomena at the moment. We allow you to take deep dives into associated activity. So in this case, let's look at this one in terms of FBI fraud schemes in relation to healthcare supplies during COVID-19. You'll provide all the information you need, and most importantly, the intelligence that you need. So just by clicking on Intel, without having to do hardly any work at all, I'm able to understand the main tactics used by this particular Intel alert. And a number of people on the calls, some of the more technical security focused people would know what these pieces of malware are. But this, you can see just by looking through the counts, some of the strategies and tactics. Why is this useful to the organization? This is useful because this shows you exactly how you're going to be targeted on a more broad sense, whatever your industry. So I hope that's been a really good overview. I think that later on there'll be sometimes questions, and I'll be delighted to help answer any of those. So I invite you to reach out to us as well should you wish to get a more sort of personalized demo relevant to your organization. We can even show you some examples actually of how you're being targeted live in the demo, and we'll be delighted to help you there. So with that being said, let me hand back to my esteemed colleagues. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tom. So we've had a few questions come through, and just a reminder, if anyone else has got any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat directly to me, Dustin Smith. Okay, so one of them that has come through. So how do you see the dark web, and can my team look at the dark web with your tool?
Yeah, so so we basically look at the dark web in two different ways. We use both our automation, which consists of a number of different types of crawlers looking across the dark web, and we also use as part of our closed sources our own intelligence team, which has infiltrated a number of different places on the dark web. And I shan't give too much detail on exactly how they do that. Perhaps my colleague might be able to give a little bit more. And what we're doing, so we're using a combination approach, making the best of automation to really speed things up and really provide you with information as soon as possible, as well as human analysis, and that's where the power of having a multilingual team comes into effect.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, Tom, a lot of our team have got a background, from government, from law enforcement. A lot of what they do in terms of getting access to those closed sources, the ones you can't just search, even if you've got a tool router, is they're building credibility. They're building these personas that might seem like they're cyber criminals. They're part of that community. They're contributing in different ways. I won't go into too much details for operational reasons. But the key there is that they're building credibility, and I think, as Tom said, that's where having those kind of Russian speakers within the organization really helps us get access to those kind of Russian forums, for example. And I think the only thing else I would say is, I think Tom's given you a great overview of the portal and how the dark web material might go in there. But one thing that we also do offer is more bespoke reports. So in the past, we've actually answered very specific questions, written up a report on how a client might be interested in exactly how they're being mentioned on a certain dark web forum, or if something being discussed on the dark web, how that might affect them. And as I said, we're able to deliver a very bespoke, very customized report to them. I think that's the key with intelligence, is making it bespoke, making it kind of actionable to a client.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then another one that's come in is, how do you see third-party risk? I want to know about my suppliers or partners that might be acting on my behalf.
Sure thing. So I think there's a few different ways we can do this. I think one thing is that we are detecting third-party exposure via Searchlight. So all those things that Tom just showed you, if there was a data breach impacting your organization's data, and that data was exposed because a third party leaked it in some way, or it was left exposed, that's something that's going to come through in your portal. And we're monitoring credentials, all of that sort of thing. And I think at the end, Tom showed you the COVID profile. That's kind of industry news, what's going on more broadly in the kind of cyber threat landscape. So there you can keep track of incidents, attacks, data breaches affecting your suppliers. So we have tags for different companies, for different organizations when they're impacted by a cyber attack. Those are things that any client can kind of subscribe to, they can customize, and that just really allows you to kind of keep a broader coverage of what your suppliers are up to and how they're impacted in the threat landscape.
Okay, great, thank you. And then another one that's come through is, how do we get the assets, and do we have to install anything?
I think I'll hand over to Tom for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer your second question first, no, you absolutely don't need to install anything. One of the fantastic things about Digital Shadows is we look at your organization in the same way that a threat actor would from the outside. So whilst there are integrations available, if you wish to use them, they're completely optional, and it's not something you have to do. From an asset perspective, what we do is we help you build up the assets at the very beginning. This is a very easy and straightforward process, and then we actually upload those into the portal for you. So assets, what do we mean by assets? Just to clarify, because I think we touched on it very briefly, were things like brand name, company name, key technical information, so such as do you have any applications, things like that. So very straightforward piece of information. We'll help you at the very beginning to collate those, and then we will upload them into the portal for you. Or then once they're into the portal, it really is easy to change and add new ones. And one of the great things on that subject is the fact with Digital Shadows there is absolutely no limit to the number of assets or users within the portal. So there are no constraints, and that's why we actually invite our customers to add as many assets as they feel that they need to. It really is a fantastic capability.
Great, thank you. Another one that just comes through is, what can we do if we find a spoof profile?
Jamie, do you want to get this one? So there's a number of different things we can find. We can do. One of the key ones, and I know Jamie might come in and give you a bit more of a sophisticated answer than mine. But one of the key ones that I would use is our takedown service. So within a couple clicks, we can actually go ahead and contact the person who's hosting that information and have that information removed for you. And that's starting that process really is as easy as just clicking Start Takedown.
Yeah, and I think on that, Tom, it's a really important point, and it's something that it's really up to clients. I think for some clients they like to do those takedowns themselves, but they are able to kind of assign that to us, and make sure we get the legal kind of paperwork in place. But really allows Digital Shadows to act on a client's behalf to really be kind of proactive in making sure that these things are taken down really quickly.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for a couple more. Just one more that came through. I already have brand protection. What would I gain from DRP above regular brand monitoring on social media?
I mean, I think there I would turn to the 3 pillars that we discussed. So if you are kind of doing that, negative sentiment, etc. As I said in my talk, that's part of a broader issue around online brand security. Which involves all sorts of things from VIP exposure to domain infringement. But then, you can even go more broad still. And if you look at that digital risk umbrella term, it also affects the data loss, all the things kind of Tom showed you on the kind of demo, as well as that attack surface reduction. So I think the key here is that this isn't just about some negative sentiment on Twitter. It's not just about an attack on your Twitter account. It's about the entire threat landscape, the risk landscape that extends beyond your network perimeter, which is becoming increasingly relevant. We talk about COVID and the increase of remote work, people embracing clouds, people embracing all these kind of new exciting opportunities. It seems kind of obvious that you need a kind of a platform to take you with you on that journey, or at least a strategy. And those are things that we can certainly help with as a firm.
And just to add to Jamie's point, it's also worth not forgetting from a more security perspective, putting the brand reputation to one side, that social media is also often used as a method to deliver malicious payloads. So imagine the impact of having a spoof profile being used to link your customers out to a malicious site. So it's also used from a security perspective for attackers to use the trust that you've built up as part of your brand via social media to actually deliver their malicious payload.
Great, thank you. And then a few more that have come through. Is there any integration with NDR, network detection and response solutions such as Vectra?
So I know we have a lot of API integration, but I'm not 100% sure on the specifics. I don't know if Tom's able to add any more detail on that one.
Yeah, so we have a number of turnkey integrations with some of the largest providers of source solutions, automation, SIEM solutions. To go back to the specific question about Vectra, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. I'll need to double check. But if we have a turnkey integration, but bear in mind, because we use an open RESTful API as our main interface, that there are actually technically no limits to the number of things that you could create an integration for, and that's fully documented. So it can be easy to create a custom integration if required.
Perfect, thank you. Another one is, how do you protect if my application is running over IaaS, like Azure, Google, AWS?
So it really doesn't matter to us where that application is hosted. So whether that web application or device application is hosted on Azure, whether it's on AWS, whether it's a more traditional application which is downloaded via an app store, we can monitor for spoof copies of that across the open web, and also help you identify when normal expected behavior of that application has been modified and exists somewhere else other than where it's supposed to be. So there's a range of different questions around that. But yes, to answer your question broadly, we absolutely support those scenarios.
Great, thank you. I think we've just got 4 minutes just to finish answering some questions, and any questions we don't get to, we will respond directly to you via email. So another one is, for any client using a threat intelligence platform and a SOAR, how important is your data for enriching and contextualizing security data for understanding the threat and responding to them?
I mean, I think there I would echo what Tom discussed in terms of a lot of this, a lot of these digital risks, these things that extend beyond the perimeter, do really integrate with threat intelligence and those perimeter attacks in terms of these are often delivery methods, etc., etc. I think in terms, we see ourselves, very much as a threat intelligence platform, and a lot of what we provide is that intelligence of just a different area, different focus. We do clearly cover kind of nation state activity, malware attacks, etc., but try and kind of provide a different bit of context there, and often it's about seeing that whole life cycle. So I can give kind of few examples where we might see on the dark web a lot of discussion of a certain tool, it being very popular, or a new tool being advertised, a new Trojan being advertised. Now that kind of gives organizations a real kind of advance notice of what could be coming around the corner in the threat landscape. It's all well and good, seeing a story on the news that a Motet or some banking Trojan has been really active. But can we kind of anticipate that by seeing how popular it is online? So I think that would be kind of one area where we can kind of really help. And then I think the second piece is the intelligence after an attack has taken place. So when we think of data breaches, I think often there's that tendency for organizations to kind of throw in the towel once they've been breached and think, oh, we've been breached, we're very sorry, we'll let the regulator know, and they kind of feel that they've suffered that attack. But actually, I think there's an optimistic story to tell here, and that is that even if you have been breached, as an organization, you still have the agency to really change things and really improve the situation, really mitigate things still. And if you've got that threat intelligence on how that data might be being used, so if you can see, for example, that say you're a bank and you've got some credit card numbers that have been stolen, if you can see that those credit card numbers are being advertised for sale, and then you can see that someone's actually purchased them, you get a sense of the timelines that you're working with. Or conversely, it might be that the threat actor that stole those tried to monetize them directly. So being able to understand what's going on with your data once it has been breached really helps in a variety of ways, especially around incident response and communicating with those that might be affected. So I think providing that kind of pre-attack intelligence as well as the post-attack intelligence is really important.
Perfect. And then just one question before we have to
Jamie,
go.
I may add, Heather, sorry. If I may add also to what Jamie was mentioning, it's very important to get the post-attack and the pre-attack information. But what we see with a lot of people, once they have threat intelligence platforms, either like Threat Connect or Eclectic or Anomaly or any other, as well as source solutions starting from CyberSponse, Demisto, or whatever. It's very important to get the full picture using the integration of all of these. So as per what Gartner discussed in the definition of a real SOAR offering, it has to combine threat intelligence with all its aspects, and it has to combine automation, orchestration, incident response, and threat hunting into one umbrella. I think that ties up also to the vector question. So the importance of data that comes from digital shadows would tie up to internal information or internal intelligence inside the network that says, okay, yes, this breach is out there, but we're already part of it, and it's in this phase in the attack cycle, and this is what can be done. This can go back to things like Vectra for threat hunting and finding more information. It can go to a SOAR to start initiating actions, and at the same time, it will go back to digital shadows in terms of handling or initiating some playbooks and taking actions, or further elaborating into takedowns or stuff like that, using an automated approach. Because as we see with the intensity of incidents that happen day by day, it's very important to tie up all these things together. We're not looking for an extra burden or an extra layer that requires more interaction.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Rami. Unfortunately, we've got to leave it there for today. Any questions that we haven't got to, we will respond directly to you via email. And I'll also be sending the slides and the recording over today for you guys to get. So thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you everyone for joining. And have a lovely day. Thank you. Bye-bye.